broadcasting live from the Foghorn Brewhouse in the heart of the Newcastle CBD. This is Lunaticks Live. Please welcome your hosts, Greg Hall and Olivia Ollie.
Welcome to the Lunaticks Live, episode 10, here at the Foghorn Brewhouse on King Street in Newcastle. And joining us tonight is Marie Antoinette. Madame, thank you very much. Now, in a way, I guess we're talking about virtual reality, but for the past, since May last year, you have been creating your own reality, in a way, haven't you?
Yes, I'm currently spending 1 year dressed as Marie Antoinette in full 18th century replica costume. And so that's a 24/7 commitment. I go to work, I do the school run, I do kids sport, and I dress like this.
So how many outfits are you wearing? Because she traditionally probably changed her outfits at least 4 or 5 times during the day. How do you find that?
Yeah, I'm a woman on a budget, so at the moment I've got a tight rotation of 3 very beautiful dresses, and we're making more as we speak.
So there's a whole crew of people working behind very hard to actually create the image that is Marie Antoinette.
I'm very, very lucky. I've got a wonderful creative team who fortunately can sew.
So what's been the response from when you started to when it happened?
Okay, there's a spectrum. It ranges from pure fear to adoration and sort of indifference in the middle. Some people are just so alarmed or disrupted by the sight of an 18th century figure going about their everyday life in Maitland that, they almost have a fear response. Other people think it's wonderful. They start rocking their high school French. They do a little dance, they bow or curtsy. I love those kind of responses. Other people are just preoccupied and they don't actually notice what's going on.
So almost you've been creating, in a way, a world that was Marie Antoinette's. So have you created your own Versailles?
Actually, I changed my address to Versailles. It's quite nice. You get your phone bills now which say Versailles and, Maitland. It's interesting. You've got this interface between myself as a person and this historical character that I'm impersonating. So there is a certain amount of reality slippage that happens there as well. I'm really interested to see what playing a French queen for a year is going to do to my psyche after a year of this, but it remains a work in progress.
So eventually, in our discussion about virtual reality, perhaps sometime soon people will be able to immerse themselves in the world that is Marie Antoinette. Please, a round of applause for Marie Antoinette. Thank you. So, cutting to, welcome here at the Foghorn, Lunaticks Live. I'm here with my fellow co-anchor, Olivia. Welcome.
Hello there, Greg. Welcome to number 10. That's very exciting.
We survived this far.
We've made it. So do you think that Marie Antoinette is a real, live, augmented reality?
Well, I was going to pose that question, and perhaps Marie could explore that a little bit more, but that's a very good point. And I guess virtual reality now, where it stands in terms of the technology and combining it with gaming AI, actually allows people to immerse themselves in that world genuinely. Now, the question is, of course, we know there's a lot of issues around addiction with gaming and so forth, but there was a fantastic Catalyst episode. In fact, the new Catalyst reboot was episode 1 with Dr. Jordan Guan, who's actually been exploring that, and he spent 5 hours in a virtual world experimenting with what he could do, and they tested his reactions and responses pre and post, and he literally lived this world for 5 hours with a virtual camera or virtual VR set on his head, and he came out of it and he actually experienced after it that he kept seeing flashes of light, the gunfire, and he was trying to go into sleep.
I think, Greg, what I find fascinating about VR is that it can be so many different things. So what you're talking about just before about immersing yourself in the world, there's internet platforms like Second Life where we've immersed before, but VR, I understand, is when you put on the headset and you enter another space. But maybe I'm completely wrong, and the man to tell us about it is this man, Ivan Demidov. Now, Ivan is from Virtual Perspective here in Newcastle, and you are the technical director and co-founder. You are the man to tell us all about what VR is, what it does, how it works, and how we can fall in love with it.
Well,
pardon me, virtual reality is a tool to convey all sorts of different perspectives, hence the name Virtual Perspective, the company that I work for. Basically, you can be immersed in any kind of world whether it's a fictional world, whether it's a historical recreation, a reinterpretation, that type of thing. And like anything, it is a tool. So if used inappropriately, it can cause harm. But basically, you really need to understand the technology to use it appropriately.
What's the like? Am I right? Does virtual reality mean we have the headset, or is there other forms of virtual reality?
Well, typically, virtual reality is when the individual is completely immersed in their environment, by which we normally have a headset placed on the person. And the way we deliver the message of the stereoscopic effect is each eye in, say, something like a Google Cardboard or even Oculus Rift or HTC Vive, which are all different virtual reality technologies, each eye gets a slightly different image, which tricks the brain into thinking that there's actually a three-dimensional reality to what it's seeing. So the technology of the stereoscope has been around since Marie Antoinette time, but basically in virtual reality we can harness that and augment it with all sorts of real-time game engines that make it look like you're actually there, and also being able to turn your head, things like the gyroscope, really make you feel like you're in the environment.
So to some extent, the work and the technologies you're using, and you're at a point where you need to marry that up with the developments with smartphone technology and so forth. But could you be doing what you're doing now with that actually happening, or would we still be back watching 3D films in the bad old days to some extent?
Well, the bad old days were not so bad. But basically, with things like the smartphone technology, the sort of processing power that's imbued in most of them, they're actually way more powerful than we need them to be. So the fact that we can use something like a Gear VR or a Google Cardboard even, we can harness that ability that's already encased in our smartphone, which a lot of us take for granted. I know I do. I don't use social media as much as I probably could and that sort of thing. But basically, the technology to amplify the experience already exists, and we all have one in our pocket. So it's accessible to everybody.
Okay, let's talk about your business. Let's talk about Virtual Perspective for a moment. What is Virtual Perspective, and what are you guys doing?
Well, at Virtual Perspective, we create virtual reality and augmented reality software that basically can recreate any kind of environment that our client or our customers eventually will want to experience. So, for instance, we can recreate ancient Rome as it was back in those days, and so kids can actually, instead of reading a textbook or looking at film, can really experience what it's like being in a Roman township, or even being a Roman, having interactivity with the locals, even hearing local language and things like that.
So you can immerse yourself in that historical world.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And of course, you're Moscow born, I believe, in 1987. 87. So any ambitions to recreate the Moscow perestroika, glasnost?
Well, we can for historical retrospective perspective, because that's sort of what we do. But in terms of educating people, but I certainly wouldn't want to live in that world perpetually like that person spent 5 hours in. That's too much for me.
Let's cut to a video to have a look at what Virtual Perspective is producing. Or we could just keep talking about it.
Oh, there it goes.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, so Ivan, what we can see now, this is being created in what AI engine that you've been using?
Well, at Virtual Perspective, we use a real-time game engine called Unity, which is very powerful, very robust in the ways that it can incorporate all sorts of different modalities to deliver the virtual reality. Not only virtual reality, it can do other stuff too, even 2D or 3D games like AAA titles that you could play at home on your PlayStation. But if you create it in preparation to deploy it to virtual reality, you can create any sort of environment and port it to that sort of thing. For example, what you're seeing here, all that could be made to be virtual reality compatible, but obviously this is a two-dimensional projection of what it is. So if you really want to see what it feels like to fly through an industrial site like that, you should put on a headset and give it a go.
Okay, so why would we want to? So explain to me why we would want to walk around, a building or a structure of this size. What's the value of this?
Well, right now we have the Pasha-Bolka 10-year storm, and it's over, but that's okay. You can actually download that for free from the App Store for both iOS and Android.
Right.
If you have a Google VR or any kind of VR headset, which we made for Newcastle Council and the museum, which is basically a 10-year anniversary recreation of the Pasha-Bolka storm in virtual reality. So it's to commemorate what happened, and that gives people an insight into what was going on back then. But as far as the industrial stuff, you can really zoom in or zoom out and see sites from angles that you could not possibly imagine say explode, not literally, but like in 3D, blow up a model of, say, some sort of engine and see individual components, interact with them, see what you need to fix. Because if you're an engineer trying to advise somebody on site, perhaps it would be useful if you could see what the site looks like without having to fly over there.
Well, I mean, it steps into the world of what we call pre-visualization for filmmaking. So all the huge spectaculars recently, what we call tentpole productions, spend a lot of time in actually that whole pre-visualization, stepping through camera positions and so forth. I was also thinking that it's an invaluable tool in terms of anticipating major problems, work health and safety.
Absolutely. One of the major applications for it would potentially be a site induction. And rather than doing a virtual induction when you actually get to site, say they show you slides of what the escape route is and so on and so forth, you can navigate the site, free roam it as we call it, go to the place where you might be working and activate the alarm, and our program that we've already made can automatically, using AI, navigate you to the closest first aid station or the first exit or anything like that we want to program into it.
So it could be used largely as a training tool for different businesses where they're operating. Actually, no. So my understanding is they could use it to train their stuff, but could they also do it in pre-planning when they're like architects would use it when they're building a structure to look at what are the pros and cons of how this will fit in the actual real world?
Absolutely. We've done projects like for Lake Macquarie City Council, we did the 2050s thing and also flood modelling, which were both community engagement projects to see what the future may look like. Should these developments go ahead. And so, for example, using a technology like augmented reality, you can superimpose a building or a bridge onto a landscape automatically because the phone will detect the land formation and drop the building in so people can get feedback about what that would look like in their neighbourhood, or give their feedback rather, before it's even constructed.
So thinking about this, and you mentioned the word future, so you, Tim Davidson, yourself, co-founded Virtual Perspective. When you first set it up, what was your initial ambition? What did you envisage for what you wanted to do?
Well, our passion is to recreate history in a way that we can pass it on without losing any details or any nuances to the children and subsequent generations, because that is kind of what drives me, is technology can be used as a force for good in the sense that it can be used to educate, it can be used to preserve things. For example, we actually did a laser scan and a LiDAR scan of Indigenous cultural heritage sites that would potentially be lost one day. And we've preserved them, and we can recreate them in VR so you can go and visit them.
So, to some extent, you've touched on areas that are, I guess, it's kind of a natural given that you would do, but the reality is that virtual reality and the tools can also have a very different perspective. Now, there's some really interesting research around the creation of literally a photorealistic individual. This was done through the Holocaust Center in Washington, D.C., where they actually were able to program. They filmed a Holocaust survivor who spoke movingly about their experiences, but then putting into an AI engine, they actually were able to then change that around so when the person received a question from somebody via a smartphone, they could respond. Now, to some extent, we could create a virtual character. I'm actually wondering whether Trump could be that individual. I mean, I don't know. He does go off message quite a lot. Perhaps it's all part of it. But what are the other issues that I think dealing with virtual reality, augmented reality, that is you as a creator need to be aware of?
Well, typically we try to keep our experiences relevant to some sort of benefit to humanity. So I would not recreate Trump if I could avoid it. But as you said before, with the Holocaust survivor virtualization, when you walk a mile in someone else's shoes, it changes your perspective entirely on what their life is like and what they could be like, why we should empathize with them. And so if you can't do that, then typically people grow detached, at least in my experience. So with virtual reality, we can bridge that gap. We can deliver experiences that don't currently exist to people who potentially either want them or would benefit from having them.
Let's talk about the capabilities of storytelling when it comes to VR. As the technical director, I imagine you're more across the limitations and the future of it. I know there's different apps out there for VR, such as Little Star, where it's quite exciting to watch different forms of storytelling where you're placed in the body of a person and you look around and you live as that person. From a technical point of view, to tell a story with VR, what can we be looking at for the future, or what are we looking at now?
Well, I'll give you one of my favourite examples is a tech demo created in virtual reality, which was you're the size of a blood cell and you're flying through the arteries, and there's a narrator telling you those are the platelets and here's the white blood cells and here's what they do, this is why they're important. It's like Star Wars in virtual reality, but you're learning about something biologically intrinsic to all of us. So as far as storytelling goes, when you make it, what's the right word? I guess it's impactful, or people want to actually do it. Whether it's learning about the bloodstream or whether it's learning about the Holocaust, I guess that's a macabre topic. But still, if you make it something that people want to do because you make it compelling, then you can deliver your message and it will stick better.
Because in fact that process, the hemoglobin and the whole blood process, is used with first-year medical students. Is that right, at the University of Newcastle? They were using that program, because I actually saw and sat in and watched that. And I think Tim was saying that they were interested in utilising it as a teaching tool.
That's right. So you could recreate on a quantum level what quantum physics potentially could look like when visualised. I mean, it blows most people's minds when you read it in a textbook or the equations. It makes no sense to people. But perhaps if we can use visual cues, I know abstract concepts like tangents and parabolas and whatnot were really impenetrable to me when I was younger. But as I got older and I kind of understood how all that stuff worked, I could visualise it more than I could understand it. And so when you deliver it in that mode, you can really get the message across. So you have to pick your targets. But most things can be enhanced with virtual reality at the very least.
So realistically, driving it forward, we know that the whole pay system, online pay system, was driven by the erotic pornographic industry, because effectively they were trying to figure out ways to pay for basically what was coming down the line almost free. What do you think is going to be the real driver for that big leap off for virtual reality, where it becomes something that is part of our everyday life?
Well, virtual reality is in itself, in the current modes that we have, if you exclude the multiplayer games like Second Life and that sort of thing, it's actually quite lonely because you're in there with a bunch of 3D shapes. So if we can make it somehow inclusive, where more people actually collaborate together and we maybe get over the uncanny valley of making people look like people in 3D, which we're getting close to, we're almost there, 95% I would say. So as soon as we're there, it would feel more like real life, but you could do incredible things. You could do things you can't in real life with other people. And isn't that incredible?
Yeah, which is why it's picked up so massively in games. So you can.
So sex with aliens, that's possible, is it?
It is possible. Just see this guy.
Sex with who?
Sex with aliens.
Oh, right.
On that note, let's cut to an ad break there, Greg. Thanks so much, Ivan. Thanks for joining us.
In the 13 years we've been here, the change has been phenomenal. I think part of that is people staying here or people have moved here have infused their own flavor onto the city now. Instead of talking about the rejuvenation of Newcastle, it was time to do something about it. Being a developer and builder in the background, that's what I got in to do. And we developed this old space, got rid of the dirt floors and really turned it into a pretty versatile venue. We were lucky, similar to Melbourne, in that we have these old buildings that can be rejuvenated into working spaces now, and it's somewhat different than having just a new modern sleek city. It's got a mix of old and new. I think one of the great things in Newcastle that people don't even realize is that it nurtured culture and it nurtured craftsmanship. We've got an eclectic music scene, an art scene, a sculpture scene, theater. You have all those parts of culture that people really like to see, and maybe you're not fighting an hour of traffic to get to them. I call Newcastle really the Melbourne of New South Wales, and I've said it to a few people, and I had a fella said to me, oh, it's like Melbourne up there now with all the laneways and different things in the old buildings that you didn't get rid of up there, and that's really what's starting to come out now, and once they come and visit, they realize, oh, this has really got something to offer here. The laid-backness comes through the fact that there's not that many people grinding to get places because of the traffic or the jam-packed on the train, or all of that, I think, creates a lot less stress. It's just the ability to walk around the city. So with the number of Eat Street precincts that we have here, Derby and King Street's become one, Beaumont Street in Hamilton is changing all the time, Honeysuckle Precinct, you've got places down near the water. So many of the things that people say, oh, I'd like to be in Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane for, I think Newcastle has those now. I think more people have that flexibility to choose where they live if they're good at what they do or they want to start something, and I think the city has a number of those attributes that'll make it attractive to people.
Good evening and welcome to Tech News. I'd like to kick off tonight with a new application that is currently out in private beta. They are currently looking for additional testers, and the application is looking to replace the docket system for Transport New South Wales initiative called the Taxi Transport Subsidy Scheme for those unable to use transport due to a disability. Swift Fare are working to support the Department of Finance, Services and Innovation to bring these subsidies into the 21st century by replacing the current paper docket system with a digital solution. Android application will be ready as of tomorrow, iPhone application and screen reader support by the end of next week. So jump onto Swift Fare to sign up to the trial. So I'll have a chat now about some of the hardware that you can use to get into virtual reality. There are 3 different ways that you can jump in at the moment. If you're a PlayStation 4 owner, you can grab the full VR kit for $550, where you normally purchase your console hardware from. So whether that's JB Hi-Fi, EB Games, best place to stick to. The second option would be to use your mobile phone in a Google Daydream or Samsung Gear VR. This will only provide the best experience that your phone can output. So we get into the heavy hitters now, where you'll need to make sure that you do the research before you purchase one of these devices. So these 2 products are actually powered by your home PC. So whether you're doing this for business or home or consumer use, you're going to want to use a compatibility checker on your PC to make sure that it can run it before you buy the hardware. The Oculus Rift website has a compatibility checker that will check your computer and also the amount of USB ports available, as that is what the hardware will rely on as well. The HTC Vive setup will also have a compatibility checker on their website. However, the Vive is powered by Steam VR. So I would pull down that compatibility checker to try it, as that is where you will be getting the majority of your online content. So if you are looking for brick and mortar locations to get out and about right now and purchase one, I've found Harvey Norman seems to have the best range of device, whether you're after mobile or the HTC Vive. That one is $1,400 at a brick and mortar store though. So if you were to purchase that online, it's $999. And if you go for the Oculus, it's $630 delivered. So there are two very different prices there. You will need to make sure that the one that you go for has the games and the software that you want to move forward with. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll throw back over to Greg and Olivia.
Welcome back to the Lunaticks live from the Foghorn Brewhouse in King Street, Newcastle, episode 10, and we're talking all about virtual reality. And great to hear some of that stuff with Chad. I mean, great news there, and all the different elements and things that you can actually access via the apps and various other elements that come together to make your virtual world. Perhaps you may be able to develop your own app and work with Marie Antoinette and immerse yourself in her world of the 18th century France in Maitland. Versailles, perhaps.
Do you think we need to contact Harvey Norman after that very detailed plug from Chad of where to get your gear?
I think so. I mean, that was sneaky. And look, I think we have a chat with Gordon. I love his little interstitial. Now, I want something like that for you and me. You know, we could have one for Olivia, and she comes up in the actual television.
That sounds like a wonderful idea,
I
Greg.
can come
I
over
look
the
forward
top
to
or something,
producing
like a
it.
dragon.
Without any more crazy banter, let's have a chat with Martin Carr from Applied Virtual Simulation.
Evening, Olivia. Evening, Greg.
Evening.
Good to be here.
Martin, you, for what I'm aware, you're producing virtual reality training for the Defence Force.
Yeah, that's right. In a nutshell, we build simulators for military applications, primarily land applications, so for the Army. And we use a combination of traditional simulator construction. In addition, we use virtual reality as well, as the training need dictates.
So let's talk about the what I can only see as a lot of pros in this idea. What are you doing? How are you helping and enhancing the skills for defence recruits?
Well, our simulators are designed for training applications that involve teamwork. So we're talking about taking teams of soldiers between, say, 5 and 15 or 20 soldiers and providing them with a virtual environment in which there's a scenario that will present them with a situation that they could be presented with in an operational context or in a training context. So we've delivered a simulator to the Army School of Transport that has the capability of having a full section, so 5 vehicles, 15 guys driving down the road and encountering some kind of situation, whether it's all of a sudden a crowd, a vehicle accident, through to an IED strike, an attack by enemy. So any kind of scenario we can create in the virtual environment, and they can work as a team to resolve the situation.
So each person has a responsibility, they know what they need to do, but in the safety of a virtual world.
Exactly right. So initially a lot of people thought virtual reality would be, or the new virtual reality technologies would be very effective for teaching people how to do things, how to drive a truck, how to fly an aircraft, or use a weapon system. Actually, in fact, VR has shown to be of limited utility in defence applications. You want to teach someone how to drive a truck? Well, it's not that expensive. You can get them in a truck and get them for a drive. But if you want 15 people driving for 100 kilometres through perhaps a hostile environment, that kind of training is very expensive and very difficult to do for the military. So the virtual environment allows them to do things that would just be, too expensive in terms of cost, time and risk. So it allows them to achieve a higher level of training.
Sorry, Martin, just following on that point in terms of exposing people to those situations. Now, about 3 weeks ago, Catalyst kicked off their rebooted additional series, and the first one was all about virtual reality. And the presenter, Dr. Jordan Wang, who's actually a biomedical scientist, he visited an institution in the United States where they're actually working with veterans who are experiencing post-traumatic stress, and they're actually putting them through those various situations. But the one thing that the scientists were saying was that they could actually also train people how to respond in those circumstances to ameliorate the emotional impact. Is this some of the work that the Australian Army is interested in, and is this what you're doing as well?
Yeah, it's certainly an area of interest for defence, for Army, for full tri-service applications. It's not the area that we focus on. We focus specifically on making soldiers better, and you can see that up on the screen. That's our simulator there. That's at the Army School of Transport in Puckapunyal in Victoria. So for those of you that know about the simulation technology, you'll see it's a mix of traditional hardware, but we also use VR headsets as well. But yeah, certainly it's about exposing them to situations that they will likely encounter or potentially encounter in an operational environment, so that once they do experience those simulations, they've already done it before, so the cognitive load is going to be much lower when they're confronted with that situation.
Or so our defence official or leaders would hope, I guess. Because, I mean, just the sheer cost of recuperating people post their experience, no matter whatever the level load, is quite significant. So have they approached you about that yet? Or?
In broad sense, we do get asked questions about whether our technology could be used in those applications. It's not an area of expertise for us, and I'm sceptical in some ways of the capability of the technology in certain applications. At the same time, I've seen it be amazingly effective. And if you're looking at triggering a response, an interesting anecdote might be one of the most effective ways of exposing someone to a stressful environment by method of treating their post-traumatic stress or helping them come to terms with a traumatic environment is actually smell. So when there's a lot of research around triggering these events or getting people used to events. For example, if they've had a traumatic experience, involved in a theatre like Iraq or Afghanistan, involved in a vehicle movement, they may become very anxious when driving, or they may see a particular feature on a road or a bridge, just creates anxiety. What they found is to sort of trigger that stressor response, one of the most impactful stimuli is actually smell. So actually by smell generators that will generate, cordite, so the smell of gunfire, the smell of blood, and they are scarily effective, almost more so than a visual fidelity.
And just to illustrate that point, I'd urge everyone to actually go and go to iView on the ABC and watch that, because in fact the presenter was exposed to this and they had the smell sensors running. Right. So they issued diesel, cordite, post-explosion, gunfire, and then they also had a simulator in the seat. So when the IED went off, as they went over it, they actually felt it, or he felt it. And he was actually quite, when he took off the headset, quite traumatised, he said. And he was wondering, because he posed the question to the scientists, well, how effective is it in actually helping soldiers deal with that experience?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, for people that have been involved in a traumatic incident like that, when deployed on operations, that's going to trigger a very visceral response.
Sorry, we've got some technical issues there, but continue.
For our class of simulators, that would be less effective because if you're junior trainees haven't been on operations, haven't been exposed to that stimulus, and they're not going to get the same physiological response and mental response as someone that's been in a traumatic environment. So we certainly don't use things like that in our simulators. Our simulators are designed to expose someone to a situation in a relatively benign environment. So you're exposing someone to a complex situation in a benign environment, rather than just throwing them into a situation they would encounter on operations. So they're dealing with a complex situation where the environment is benign. So they're able to think through the problems, without being, extremely mentally taxed, physically taxed, scared potentially. And it allows them to process through, remember their training, remember what they've been taught, come up with a solution, communicate effectively. And then that, through iterations in the simulator, time over time, when they do, and hopefully they'll never encounter a situation like that in reality, but when they do, they'll be able to process it, and they'll be able to deal with that cognitive overload much more effectively.
Sorry, everyone. Martin, what you're doing is highly specialised. There's a lot of people out there who have the tech capabilities to go out and produce VR content, but what you're doing is so highly specialised to train people in various circumstances. Can you give us a little bit of a backstory about how you even established or went about establishing a VR business in this realm?
Sure. Well, I guess I came to it from the other direction. I'm a former Army officer, so I came to it from a non-technical background. I was an Army reservist for many years, which meant that I had one foot in either camp. So working a regular job, as many Army reservists do, and also keeping one foot in the Army. And I find when it comes to innovating, developing new solutions, there's two main areas in which I think innovation occurs. I mean, one is at the very cutting edge. So you're talking about specialists that train to high levels of technical knowledge and expertise in a very narrow area. And these are the guys out there that are building the VR headsets. They're innovating new technical capabilities. Then on the other hand, there are the people, and I put myself in this camp, that are that kind of have a foot in two camps. So they understand a bit about the technology, but they have a background in my case, the military, but it might be mining, it might be logistics, it might be healthcare. So you kind of straddle two different disciplines or industry sectors, and from there you can say, well, we can use this technology that's coming down to solve this particular problem. So it requires, and I guess the advice I would get to innovators out there, if you're looking to provide services to the mining industry or healthcare, if you're not a former nurse, trying to solve a specific problem, or a former miner, then try and find someone that has that inner experience, because they'll give you the advice that you need to really enable you to apply the technology in the right way to solve those problems.
So the application could work in an ER environment, people who were intensivist and how to respond trainee intensivist working in that space. They would find that invaluable as well. Could you create something like that?
I couldn't. I don't think I could, because I don't have the background. Yeah, certainly it would be technically feasible, but for those reasons, you'd want to work very closely with the actual people that require the training, that require the visualization, to make sure you're actually building, exactly what they need, rather than sort of, bringing a solution and then hunting for a problem.
Well, look, thanks very much, Martin, and we'll be looking at that very closely and watching over time, but no doubt a fascinating area. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
So we're going to go to, now talking about Marie Antoinette, we're going to cut to her piece. It's a little, it's an insight into the story of what a performance artist has been doing there in Maitland, living the life of Marie Antoinette.
Today's students can expect to have 5 or more periods during their life when technology has changed every aspect of our lives.
from the way we find our partners, the way we shop, socialise and work. When the world changes quickly, so do people. Now more than ever, what we need is a deep commitment to understanding the human condition. The Centre for 21st Century Humanities applies modern research make new discoveries about our culture. When paired with technology and strong partnerships with our communities and other research disciplines, this knowledge becomes powerful. Yeah. We are the Centre for 21st Century Humanities.
You have to watch it because we both know. I know. I was a hubby with that. Yeah, that's right.
It's transmitting the audio. It's just what happens.
Yeah. So, is this going? He's going up. No. Are they going?
My name is Helen Hopcroft, and I live in Maitland, a country town in New South Wales. From the 1st of May of this year, I will spend 1 year dressed as Marie Antoinette. I'm calling this pregnant to stay here as a third time.
You're about to come on.
Maitland was once the second largest city in New South Wales, a bustling centre of trade and commerce, and an important regional hub.
And that was a little snippet of Marie Antoinette, her life in Maitland. And as you heard before, she's actually renamed her where she lives to Versailles, and she gets quite excited getting mail from. But now we've got our third guest joining us, and he's become a bit of an international celebrity, along with a very good friend of ours, Angus McConnell. Joining us is Rowan O'Reilly. And so you're actually, what's your area of expertise?
So what we're doing is pioneering the use of VR in rehabilitation, specifically neurological rehabilitation. And it's proving to be a game changer. It's actually quite an amazing time to be doing this.
Give us a little bit of insight into what it is that you're doing and what's so advanced with the technology.
Okay, so to give you some frame of reference, VR is a platform. It's a platform in which we approach from a point of view of the secret appears to be matching the environment with the person's conscious and subconscious likes or dislikes. Because you can traumatize someone very easily for things that they may not even be aware of if you don't take the time to question them. For example, if a person's had a phobia that when they were a child they were held underwater, but they consciously forgot the majority of it, you put them in an underwater environment, they'll most likely be on the floor in minutes in trauma.
So just take a step back. We understand that you are using virtual reality technology in order to rehabilitate the body that may have been injured in some way, and you're using VR to activate the neuron side of it. Is that what you're up to?
There's a whole host of things we're doing with it. We're looking at basically leveraging the mind-body connection. So, for example, if you had someone with a stroke, and traditionally you see people with a stroke and they'll have what's called a hemiplegia, left or right side, which means the opposite side of the body is going to be paralyzed. Now what we can do in VR is we can put them in VR and basically mirror their body and get them to see that actually that part is under their control and it does work. And the brain being a pattern matching organism and also subject to what's called neuroplasticity, or the ability to change under appropriate stimulation, is massively accelerating the recovery process in particular types of conditions. It's really quite an incredible thing to see.
So let's talk about Angus McConnell as a case study of information. Angus is quite well known in Newcastle, and now he is becoming just as famous as you because he is a key part of this technology and this rehabilitation. Let's just talk about him as a case study to understand what levels of advancement he's getting from this.
Great question. So basically Angus has a spinal cord injury and a severe spinal cord injury at that.
C7.
That's correct. Yeah, so that's right up here somewhere. So basically Angus's prognosis was you will never feel or move anything below here. Now that's proven not to be correct. Now, we can't say for 100% what VR is empirically doing or what it's not, but we can tell you the difference between when we had VR therapy and when we didn't. And there is a significant difference. Not only that, a lot of people with acute trauma, for various reasons, are in pain. They have complex pain syndromes. Now, I can tell you straight off that VR is the most potent non-drug therapy for pain reduction that exists, even at this stage. I mean, we're talking about a mean average of 70% decrease in complex pain symptomologies. That's phenomenal in itself.
So in terms of acute pain management, this is a very serious contender for dealing with that.
Massively, massively. And the reason is fundamentally this. The brain is stuck inside a black box. The only thing it responds to is sensory input coming out through the senses, okay? If it's focused on pain, which it does, because complex pain cycles are like addiction cycles. They keep building up, and it takes more real estate on a cellular basis, but it creates more noise in the brain, which becomes very hard to ignore. When you put a person in VR, the brain becomes myopically focused on VR because it can't focus on more than two things. It's like a small kid with a shiny toy. Hi, it's doom. And as a result, it's not that the pain circuitry or the neurochemistry of pain has been defragged per se, but it's been interrupted. So that's fundamentally the mechanism you're looking at. You're looking at interrupting the pain pattern so that you can change the neurology and the biochemistry of pain signaling. Now, we don't know how long it actually takes to generate artifacts that are going to be long-lasting, but we know that it works. Because essentially, we're writing the book on this stuff in the clinic at the moment. We use it every day with every client. And all I can say is that it works. We just don't know what all of the parameters are to create long-lasting artifacts.
So the one interesting thing that struck me with the piece that was on Catalyst 3 weeks ago was knowing Gus, or Angus, is that he was very determined right from very start, even at the time of the accident, because we all, as members of the Cook Still Surf Club, everyone knew about it, but we all knew Gus and the spirit. Now, is there that relationship between just the human drive and the ability to do what he's done? Is that special, or have you, because you're using this with other clients, is that?
That's a great question, and I would say to you that there's two types of people on the planet. There's people with what's called an associated locus of control, which fundamentally means they believe that I am a conscious co-creator of my reality. I think, therefore I do. And these people can move mountains and defy the odds. The other part of the population is essentially what's called a disassociated locus of control, and that essentially means I'm a leaf on the wind and just shit happens to me and I'm a victim. Limited capabilities, no matter how good the technology is. You cannot overcome that fundamental belief and drive and support. You just can't get around it. Technology is no match for that.
I'm quite interested to hear how you even thought of using VR as a tool to help in rehab. Was it coming across the technology and thinking, or was it another form of an organic process?
No, the actual issue was that I felt that I needed VR a long time before VR actually existed. I mean, I knew that I needed it from what I was doing more than 10 years ago. The reason why I wanted it is because, you've all heard of hypnotherapy. Now, hypnotherapy and hypnagogic techniques can be very, very powerful, but only in a selected portion of the population. And that's about 50-50, roughly. And the other half just it won't work. And that's really problematic, especially if you have people with acute nervous system trauma or emotional trauma. The beautiful thing about VR is VR works on probably about 90, in our experience, about 90% of the people. There'll be about 10% of the people who just can't deal with it. It's just too neurologically overwhelming for them. So that's a stunning increase in the amount of people that can be helped with basically getting a concomitant view between the subconscious and the conscious mind. When the brain sees, hey, I'm doing that, well, then I better fill in the gaps and make that happen.
Are you using computer-generated images, or are you doing your VR work through 360 real-life imagery?
At this point, we're using pre-existing software. The reason is, the more It appears to be, and I'm saying appearing because it looks like, you know, the book's being written as we speak. It appears that the more immersive the environment is, therefore the more visually convincing it is, the more profound the effect is. So unless you have an unlimited budget to be able to create multiple realistic environments, then using off-the-shelf software seems to be a better solution at this stage.
So off-the-shelf means that it's already a world that has been produced or has been created. I find it really fascinating, the 360-degree technology, where it's the camera that films in every angle in real life. I think I'm fascinated by that technology because it's so different to the computer-generated images because it's so real, you know, and there's a lot of limitations against that 360, that real life VR experience. So is that why it's an easier and cheaper option just to go with the CG?
At this point, yes, though we very much would like to get to that point because we're all about layering the immersion. So when you start off with just your simple goggles and your motion trackers and your hand controllers, that's one level. Okay, but the more levels you can add and the more sensory levels you can add, again, you get to the point where the brain's going, well, hang on a second, I cognitively walked into this knowing this is not real, but I'm getting so much input now saying this is real, then okay, then it must be, and I have to act as if it is so, in terms of rehabilitating or rebuilding pathways or building new pathways. And I think part of that, how we're doing, the other speaker was saying before about smell. Now, smell acts on the limbic system in the brain, which is a lot to do with where memory is formed, both short-term and long-term memory. Smell is really, really potent for a lot of different reasons. And if you're trying to teach someone how to relearn something, and you can find smells associated with an environment that they used to be able to functionally operate in the past, and you were introduced that, you're again introducing another lever. Same thing with haptics. We're just about to get really high-end haptics gloves that allow us to feel and accurately track geometry for people with strokes and hand paralysis. Those things just keep deepening it by increasing the lever that the conscious left logical brain goes. It's essentially overwhelmed to a great extent.
Now, Rowan, you were saying that you're actually writing the book as you work with your various clients. So who are your partners in the process trying to achieve what you're achieving?
So we have a team of people in-house. We have people, you know, from conventional medical and from neuropsychologists, you know, neuroscientists. But fundamentally, there's no substitute for actually working with real people in real time. And because each person is going to bring something different in terms of their own personal experience of their journey, and you constantly have to be thinking, okay, so this person's walked in, for example, this person's walked in today, we can tell they're in a lot of pain. We now have to abandon their rehabilitation protocol and just try and sedate them. So what we would do is combine a number of inputs into the system to sedate them. So we use things like cranial electrical stimulation, transcranial direct current stimulation, particular type of auditory inputs, and things like tilt brush, you know, Google's tilt brush. You put someone in that and put the brush in their left hand, so it's activating their right brain, which makes them more calm. 10 minutes later, they can come out and they're just a different person. I mean, that's stunning to see.
Well, we won't let the drug companies know too much because, I mean, really, this could be a huge game changer.
Let's hope.
Rowan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was absolutely fascinating to hear what you're doing.
You're very welcome, thank you.
We'd like to give a round of applause to all of our guests who've so generously given of their time here at the Lunaticks Live. Thank you very much, Ryan. Episode 10, Virtual Reality. Now, coming up, we've got the Newey Awards, haven't we?
Newey Awards, how exciting.
So, folks, tickets are on sale. Go down. Now, what's the date for them?
Oh, I don't know, Greg. I didn't get that email.
Really? Where's Gordon? Tell us, Gordon. What are the dates for the Newey Awards? The 28th of September. And where are they going to be? Here. Right here.
At the
Foghorn Brew House. So we look forward to having everyone, all our good friends, good supporters out there, but also to our fantastic live audience. Round of applause to all of you for being here. Thank you. Real champions on a Tuesday night. We really enjoyed this one. It's fascinating, and it's really, really rich in terms of the conversation and pickings for
Oh my
the
goodness,
discussion.
it's blowing my mind. The ability to teach and learn through this technology is just wonderful.
And I'm interested in experiencing other ways of being with people.
Maybe the next one we can do with headsets.
That's right.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you for coming tonight, and we wish you all the best until the next Lunaticks Live.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Human. But what does that mean in the 21st century when today's students can expect to have 5 or more careers within their lifetime?
When technology has changed every aspect of our lives, from the way we find our partners, the way we shop, socialise and work. When the world changes quickly, so do people. Now more than ever, what we need is a deep commitment to understanding the human condition. The Centre for 21st Century Humanities applies modern research techniques to traditional subjects like history, literature and arts to make new discoveries about our culture. When paired with technology and strong partnerships with our communities and other research disciplines, this knowledge becomes powerful. We are the Centre for 21st Century Humanities. We are the human experts.
Giunse il fine il momento che godrò senza affanno in braccio l'idol mio. Timidi carri uscite dal mio petto, a tubar non venite il mio diletto.
My name is Helen Hopcroft, and I live in Maitland, a country town in New South Wales. From the 1st of May of this year, I will spend 1 year dressed as Marie Antoinette. I'm calling this project My Year as a Fairy Tale. Maitland was once the second largest city in New South Wales, a bustling centre of trade and commerce, and an important regional hub. By the time I moved here in 2013, many of the shops in the CBD were closed. I want to use my year as a fairy tale to help bring magic back into the city of Maitland, and particularly at CBD. I plan to use the publicity generated by my year as a fairy tale to lobby for the construction of a museum. The clothing of late 18th century France was highly elaborate. This is a costume I've hired, so my next steps are to work with some of the Hunter Valley's very talented young designers to create my own. I see my year as a fairy tale as being about re-enchantment, both of my own life and that of my city. I hope you'll decide to be part of this journey. Thank you.
Farce